Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
More than 211,000 people have left federal service since January. Tens of thousands of employees of contractors are also newly unemployed after the Trump administration cut spending and terminated contracts. In this week's Federal Report, Federal News Network executive editor Jason Miller tells the story of two job seekers and what others can learn from their 6-month saga. Jason, thanks for joining me to tell this important tale.
Always a pleasure, Terry, and welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be back. Let's start with the experience of the federal employee who's been on administrative leave since April. What's going on there?
This is Mark, and we'll use it as a pseudonym. Mark was a little hesitant to kind of come out and talk about himself, but I can tell you a lot about him. He's been on administrative leave since April from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, where he's worked for more than 15 years in operations. Mark said, hey, the handwriting's on the wall. It looks like they're going to close down my agency. I better start looking for a new job. I don't want to leave the government, he had told me. He says, I enjoy my job. There's a reason why I've been working for the government this long. But listen, if there's not going to be a job for me, I have to, like everybody else, pay my bills. So I got to find a job. So since April, he's submitted 103 job applications. He's gotten 24 interviews and unfortunately 0 offers. And I think this is very hard on him. Right now he's still getting paid through because he's on administrative leave because of the court cases and such that CFPB are going through. But his challenge is what's going to happen when that runs out? Where am I going to be? What job am I going to have? How do I find that job? He is someone who's married. They have kids. They live in Virginia. So as you know, Terry, as I know, as we all know, it's not an easy time. And that's just one example of someone who's had some challenges, been close on interviews, been in the final round 5 or 6 different times, been runner-up several times, but just can't get that next job. And I don't think he's, Mark is by himself there.
Certainly, we hear from a lot of folks, the federal workforce is highly qualified white-collar positions. They're all in competition with each other. How does Mark's experience compare to what those in the private sector are experiencing?
I talked to someone who's in a very similar situation. We'll call this person Rachel. Again, a pseudonym. Again, this person was happy to talk to us, just didn't want their name and their situation maybe made public. Rachel has been unemployed since April when her contract at the Treasury Department was basically doged. They lost their contract and she lost her job. Since April, she has submitted 137 applications, gotten 21 interviews. Among those was 3 letters of commitments. So if a company wins an award, she'd be on the contract. Unfortunately, the company has not won that contract, so therefore she has not gotten a new job. She has had one job offer, which she turned down, and she tells me maybe I shouldn't have when I look back at it. But, when you get a job offer in, let's say, May or June, you think there'll be better jobs ahead of me. And here we are in now November, and Rachel's still looking for a job. And a couple of things that stand out to me about what her story, very similar to Mark's story, frustration about, hey, there's a lot of competition. Her experience has been basically with artificial intelligence and some frustration. Hey, a lot of companies are using AI to scrape resumes to eliminate maybe what they call the riffraff of that initial interview. But they're also maybe not looking at the people themselves. Rachel feels like, I've been in the government contracting world for 5 years. I've had a successful private sector experience before then. I'm adaptable. I learn new skills. I have a lot of a breadth of experience to bring to any company. But if your resume doesn't meet the exact wording of what the AI is looking for, then you don't even make it past the headhunter. You don't make it past that initial screening. And I think that's a lot of frustration that this person, Rachel, is facing right now.
Those are certainly some disturbing and disheartening experiences. Did Mark and Rachel say anything about the lessons they've learned in the process or how they're staying resilient and best preparing for success?
You're right. Their experiences are unfortunately all too similar, and I think that frustration is growing. It's easy to be hopeless. It's easy to be frustration. It's easy to be disgusted with the situation. And both Rachel and Mark said they've gone through those different cycles. Sometimes, for instance, and I know this sounds kind of very simple, but Mark says, I go on walks, I exercise, I vent to people. I've been with other feds who are looking for jobs, and we kind of get together and, see, hey, I'm not the only one that's suffering or struggling through this. He even said, Mark said, I'm trying to relearn Spanish and ensuring that, my career doesn't define me, but I can define myself. The other thing that they both have talked about is the network, how important the network is, getting out there and introducing themselves and meeting people, going to conferences when they can, reaching out to people who maybe they haven't talked to in years and not feeling bad about that. And, I've talked to some experts in the field, and they said that is one of the most important things to do, and not to feel bad that, hey, I know I haven't talked to you in 6 months or 6 years, but I'm looking for a job, and I thought maybe you could help me. And I think that is really the frustration that they see, and they have to put themselves out there. I talked to Karen Lee. Karen's the co-founder and executive director of Feds Forward. They're former federal executives who have come together to try to help currently feds who are looking for jobs or former feds looking for jobs. And she said one, basic mistake they see is how feds underestimate their value, that they rely too much on USA-style jobs resume and formats that don't translate well out of government. So I think there's some things that they're both learning about themselves, Rachel and Mark, and there's things that feds generally can learn by talking to others, understanding where they stand.
As you've listened to these stories and you've listened to what Feds Forward is saying, are there some common mistakes that job seekers need to avoid in the process?
There definitely are, and I think there's not just, job seekers for federal that are former feds or contractors, but all of us to really keep in mind. I spoke with Larry Schlesinger. He is the founder and CEO of the Schlesinger Management Services, a firm that helps companies find senior executives. And he says, yes, job searching can be daunting. It can be a little intimidating, but there are some common mistakes, as you said, that really job seekers need to avoid.
The resume is not crisp. It doesn't focus on accomplishments. If there is an opportunity in the application process to include a cover letter or some way of explaining why you're interested in this specific job, they don't write a very focused message about why this job interests them. Their application looks like a form letter that maybe they've sent to 50 places today, and those get weeded out quickly. Sometimes people are a little too modest in what they've accomplished, and you need to focus on your skills, what you've accomplished, and why you can be useful to the next employer.
Karen Lee said very similar things, right? Federal employees are very mission-driven. They resiliency. They bring things that companies are really desperate right now. And federal employees, former ones, have worked through budget uncertainty. They manage complex stakeholder relationships. All of these value propositions you really need to articulate, and you need to articulate clearly, because if you don't, then you're just another resume that's in the mix. And again, as Rachel has talked about, the AI is looking for certain words, and that's not really going to get you through it. At the same time, resiliency is a huge piece to this. Both Rachel and Mark talked about their own personal resiliency. They have their bad moments. They have their times when they're frustrated, when they're depressed, but they also understand that they need to push through and figure out the way forward. And in fact, Larry Schlesinger from Schlesinger Management Services says resiliency among job seekers is both an important trait and a way to help you in the future.
Keep in mind, this is a very subjective process. And it could be that they picked the wrong person, and they might realize 2 months from now they picked the wrong person, and maybe they'll come back to you. So if you get turned down, if you advance pretty far and you think you got to the short list and you had a couple rounds of interviews, if they come and say, bad news, we just loved you, but we found somebody else who we thought was a better fit, send them a letter, send an email back to them saying, thank you so much for considering me. I really enjoyed all the conversations. I hope we can stay in touch. If you have any opportunities in the future where you think I could be a good candidate, I hope you'll let me know. Don't burn bridges. There's no reason to. Life is too short. The world is too short. Washington's a small town. You will come across some of these people in the future because they're going to leave the organization. You're going to be somewhere else, and you're going to cross paths. So all of these bad outcomes have a good byproduct, which is that you have expanded your network. You obviously impressed people to some degree by being asked to interview for a second round or a third round before they decided to go somewhere else.
In fact, Schlesinger says really the whole point of this is you're not going to get a job by throwing your resume on top of the pile. You're going to get a job by getting out there, putting yourself and introducing yourself to people, making those connections. And I think that's really the one big lesson that I think both Rachel and Mark have experienced themselves is even though they maybe are a little bit introverted, you've got to put yourself out there. You've got to shake that hand. You've got to make new relationships and revisit old ones.
Thanks, Jason. It seems like the more that technology comes into play in the job search and recruiting, the more the personal connection seems to be important.
Without a doubt, and I think both people who are looking for jobs today are finding that out.
That's Federal News Network's executive editor, Jason Miller. Jason, thanks for this story.
Always a pleasure.
You can find his story at federalnewsnetwork.com.